Natalie, my chest, I can't breathe. Call an ambulance. For God's sake, Mom, what is wrong with you now? It's Brad's birthday. Stop being so dramatic and ruining everything. That was how my daughter spoke to me while I was dying on the floor of my own house. I'm telling this story plainly because I don't want you distracted by poetry or pity. I want you to understand exactly what happened, exactly how betrayal sounds when it comes from the mouth of the child you raised. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 68 years old. I am a mother, and until that night, I believed that no matter how flawed my family was, they would never abandon me when my life was on the line. I was wrong. The night of Brad's 40th birthday party, I had already been feeling unwell. A tightness in my chest, a strange pressure that came and went. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I could rest after the guests arrived, after the speeches, after I made sure everything was perfect. That was always my role, make things perfect, then disappear quietly. The party was loud, glamorous, excessive, exactly what Natalie wanted, exactly what I paid for. I excused myself and went upstairs, thinking I just needed to lie down for a moment. That moment nearly killed me. The pain came suddenly, brutally. It felt like someone was sitting on my chest, pressing harder every second. My breath turned shallow. My left arm burned and then went numb. I tried to stand and my legs folded beneath me. I grabbed my phone and called Natalie. She answered on the second ring, already irritated. "Mom, what?" she snapped. Music pounded in the background. People were cheering. "Natalie," I gasped. "I can't breathe. My chest hurts. I think I'm having a heart attack." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh my God, you are unbelievable," she said. "You always do this. Every time something isn't about you, you suddenly have a crisis." "This isn't a joke," I whispered. "Please, call 911. Her voice hardened. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Brad is about to give his speech. People are waiting. I don't have time for your nonsense." "I'm on the floor," I said. "I can't get up." She sighed loudly, the way she used to when she was a teenager, and I asked her to clean her room. "You are such a burden," she said. "Always sick, always needy. Just take one of your pills and lie down." "Natalie, please," I begged. "I'm scared." That was when she said the words that shattered something inside me forever. "You know what, Mom? I am sick of your constant problems. If you die tonight, at least we'll finally have some peace." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my trembling hand, not understanding what I had just heard. My own daughter. The child I held through fevers. The child I protected from every hurt I could. She had just chosen a birthday cake over my life, and she didn't even sound conflicted about it. The pain intensified. My vision blurred. I tried to crawl toward the nightstand where I kept my medication. Every inch felt like dragging my body through wet cement. I reached for the bottle. My hand knocked over a glass of water instead. The glass shattered, and a sharp edge struck my temple as it fell. Pain exploded in my head, bright and blinding. I cried out, a sound raw and animal, echoing in the empty hallway upstairs while laughter floated up from below. No one came. Blood ran warm down the side of my face. My fingers slipped on the hardwood floor. I called out again Natalie's name, anyone's name, but my voice was weak, breaking apart with every breath. I remember thinking, very clearly, this is how they let me die. Not alone in the world, but abandoned. The next thing I remember is waking up under harsh white lights, my chest burning, my head bandaged, machines beeping steadily beside me. A nurse was speaking my name. A neighbor stood nearby, pale and shaken. "You had a massive heart attack," the doctor later told me. "If you'd arrived a few minutes later, you wouldn't have made it." They asked who my family was. I said nothing. Over the next days in the hospital, no one came. No flowers, no calls, no apologies. On the third night, I opened my tablet and saw photos from the party, the same party I nearly died during. Smiling faces, champagne glasses, captions about love and celebration. That was when the pain in my chest finally made sense. It wasn't just my heart that had broken. It was the realization that the people I had lived for did not care whether I lived at all. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I lay there and understood something with terrifying clarity. I had mistaken obligation for love and generosity for loyalty. And once that truth settles in, there is no unseeing it. That night, I stopped being the woman who waited to be valued. I stopped being the mother who made excuses. I became someone else entirely. They thought I was weak, confused, dying. What they didn't know was that while my body lay in a hospital bed, my mind had never been clearer. And this was only the beginning. If you felt her pain too, leave a like and comment where you're watching from. You might find someone nearby who's watching with you. I lay in the hospital bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling as the heart monitor pulsed in slow, mechanical rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. That sound, steady and indifferent, felt more human than my own daughter had. My body was stitched together, bandaged across the temple where the glass had struck, ribs sore from CPR compressions. But it wasn't the physical pain that hurt. It was the silence. No visitors, no messages, no apologies. The first time the door creaked open, I held my breath, but it was just a nurse checking my vitals. She smiled kindly and asked, "Any family coming by today, Mrs. Hart?" I forced a smile and lied. "They're probably just caught up with work." Today, I admitted. What kind of daughter doesn't even call to ask if her mother survived? What kind of family looks away as you gasp for air? The EMTs had told Gloria that if she hadn't found me when she did, I would have died. I owed that woman my life. Gloria had called 911, ridden with me to the hospital, and waited outside the operating room until they confirmed I had made it. We weren't close friends, just good neighbors. But she stayed. She cared more than Natalie did. I tried to recall every moment of that phone call, Natalie's voice, her words, her tone. "If you die tonight, at least we'll finally have some peace." That sentence echoed louder than any siren, not a heat-of-the-moment scream, not panic. Just cold dismissal. She meant it. I had a heart attack, a head wound, and days alone in a sterile room, yet what I kept replaying was that voice, irritated, burdened, disgusted by me. On the fourth night, I asked the nurse to hand me my tablet. It took a minute to tap through the screen with my trembling hands. My fingers still ached, but I needed to see it for myself. Social media was awash with photos from the party. Natalie in a red silk dress, holding a champagne flute like she was royalty. Brad posing with their friends, his arm around another woman I didn't recognize. The captions read, "Best night ever, 40 looks good on you, Brad." And cheers to love and laughter. Love and laughter. While I lay bleeding on the hardwood upstairs, while an ambulance screamed through the neighborhood, while a team of doctors cracked open my chest. The photos blurred as my eyes stung. Not from tears, I was too empty to cry, but from something deeper. That kind of ache doesn't rise to the surface. It lives in your bones. I looked through my contacts. No missed calls, no messages. Not from Natalie, not from Beatrice, my other daughter-in-law, who lived just 15 minutes away. Not even a meaningless, "How are you?" from anyone who shared my blood. That was when I stopped hoping. It's a strange thing, the moment hope dies. You expect fire and fury, but it's cold, quiet, like a switch turning off in your chest. You realize you've been holding out for someone to prove they love you, and when they don't, you stop asking. You stop waiting. The next morning, I called Sullivan. Sullivan Parker had been our family lawyer for over 20 years. He handled Martin's will after his death, helped me buy properties, draft trusts, and revise my estate. He was discreet, sharp, and most importantly loyal to me, not my children. When his voice came on the line, calm and steady, I told him everything, not just about the heart attack, but about the phone call, the silence, the things that had led to this moment, not just this week, but the last 10 years. "I'm done, Sullivan," I said. "No more chances. I want control of every asset now." "I know saying nisses, I when rear waited." He paused. "Do you want to remove Natalie and Beatrice from the will entirely?" "No," I said. "Let them stay. But I want it locked. They get nothing until I'm dead. And even then, they won't touch a cent without proving they've changed. I want a new trust, with new rules. Call it the Phoenix Trust." "Understood," he said. And I knew he meant it. He didn't ask me why. He didn't need to. I spent the next few hours on the phone, my banker, my estate planner, my property manager. Every account, title, access point that Natalie and Brad had been using canceled. Every credit card with my name attached cut. Every bank alert rerouted directly to me. It wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. For years, I had played the role of the invisible benefactor. I paid quietly. I endured quietly. I aged quietly. And now, as I recovered in this clean, impersonal room, I realized that silence had cost me everything. So I began to take it back. Not loudly, not with drama, but with power, one quiet signature at a time. A week after the heart attack, I was discharged from the hospital. They wheeled me out the front doors as if I were any other recovering patient, but I didn't feel like myself. I felt like a ghost who'd returned with unfinished business. Natalie never showed, not at the hospital, not even at discharge. The silence from her was complete, as if her performance during that phone call was just one scene in a script she had rehearsed all her life. The driver Sullivan sent helped me into the car. As we pulled away, I looked back once not at the hospital but at the life I had nearly died in service of. I would not be returning to it. We drove past the neighborhood I used to call home. I asked him to take a different route. I didn't want to see the house. My house. The house they lived in for free. The one I paid to renovate, furnish, and maintain while they threw parties and complained about the landscaping. I was dropped off at my own apartment downtown, a modest, private place I'd kept since Martin's passing. No one else had a key. It had become my retreat over the years, the one place untouched by their expectations. The doorman, Carl, greeted me with genuine warmth. "Glad to see you back, Miss Hart. We were worried." Those few words meant more to me than anything my family hadn't said. Inside, I made tea with shaking hands and sat on the sofa surrounded by silence. It didn't feel lonely. It felt clean, untouched by guilt or manipulation. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart fluttered some instinct deep down, hoping Natalie had remembered I existed. But it was an alert. One of the credit cards I'd canceled had been declined. Within minutes, 2 more notifications came through, another declined transaction, and then a failed bank transfer. They were trying to access funds I had locked. Not one message to me. "No, hey Mom, is something wrong?" "No, are you okay?" Just a silent war on my accounts. I stared at the screen and laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not angry, just amused. Because in that moment, the truth was so obvious it felt almost funny. They didn't love me. They loved my money. They loved the dinners I paid for, the gifts I sent, the tuition I covered, the last-minute emergencies I bailed them out of. They loved the power I gave them, the lifestyle I funded, the security of knowing that I was always there to catch them, financially and emotionally. But they never once looked behind the curtain to see the woman doing the giving. Not once in the past decade had anyone asked how I was. Not once had Natalie offered to take me to a doctor's appointment or even picked up groceries for me when I was sick with the flu. I was the invisible provider. And now that I had pulled the plug, their world was glitching. Later that night, Sullivan called to confirm that the Phoenix Trust was fully active. "You now control all disbursements. They get nothing unless you approve it," he said. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady. He hesitated. "Evelyn, are you sure about this?" "No," I said. "I'm not sure of anything except this: if I died last week, they would have thrown a funeral and charged it to my account, then gone to brunch." He didn't respond for a few seconds. Then he said, softly, "You deserve better." Yes, I did, and I finally knew that wasn't selfish to believe. Over the next few days, I watched the ripples of my silence spread. Natalie tried calling once. I didn't pick up. She didn't leave a message. Brad sent an email, pretending to be concerned. His words dripped with artificial sweetness. "Hey, Evelyn, just checking in, hope you're okay. Some weird stuff going on with the bank. Let us know if you need anything." I didn't reply. Beatrice, my other daughter-in-law, posted a vague message online about people who pretend to be generous but thrive on control. It was liked by Natalie and a few of their mutual friends. They were spiraling, financially, emotionally, socially. It was like watching a house of cards fall and realizing you were the table they had been resting on. I spent those days in reflection, rereading old letters Martin had written me, journals I hadn't touched in years. I began to remember who I was before I became someone else's safety net. I used to be bold, strategic, sharp. Somewhere along the way, I became small for them. Soft so they could be loud, invisible so they could shine. But that woman, the one who built businesses, who helped Martin climb out of poverty, who held her head high even as a young widow, that woman was not dead. She had simply gone quiet. Until now. I started drafting a plan, not just financial, but personal. This wasn't just about cutting them off. It was about reclaiming my life, my time, my dignity. I made a list of places I wanted to visit, books I hadn't read, people I had lost touch with who deserved my energy more than Natalie ever had. I wasn't running from them. I was walking back toward myself, and the next step would be the hardest. I was going to show them exactly what they had thrown away. 2 weeks had passed since the heart attack, and the silence from my family had turned into subtle noise. Not the kind of heartfelt concern or regret a mother might hope for, but noise born from inconvenience, entitlement, and, above all, panic. Natalie tried calling again. This time she left a voicemail. "Hi, Mom," she said, her tone sugary but strained. "We noticed there's a weird issue with the utilities. Our water was shut off this morning. We're sure it's just a billing mistake, but could you look into it? Brad and I are super busy with work right now." I replayed the message twice, just to be sure I heard her correctly. Not one word about the hospital, not even a, "How are you?" It wasn't a billing mistake. I had shut it off. The property they lived in was under my name. Everything, mortgage, taxes, insurance, was paid by me. It was time they remembered that. Or better yet, learned what it meant to live without expecting me to sweep in with a checkbook. That night, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't kick them out. Not yet. I would let them twist for a while. I wanted them to feel what I had felt. Helplessness, confusion, and the creeping realization that the safety net they took for granted had disappeared. The next day, Brad sent an email, short, curt, and written like a CEO firing an employee. "Evelyn, we need to talk. We're experiencing serious issues with access to funds, and we've already spoken with a financial advisor who's recommending legal action if things aren't resolved quickly. Please respond by end of day." Legal action. Against me. I almost laughed. Instead, I forwarded the email to Sullivan and asked him to document it. Then I deleted it from my inbox and went about my day. I had better things to do, like getting my hair cut for the first time in a year, and finally visiting the art gallery Martin and I used to love. I didn't dress in gray. I wore red. I was coming back to life. But Natalie and Brad were coming undone. 2 days later, I received a letter handwritten, the handwriting messy, desperate. It was from Beatrice. "Evelyn, I don't know what's going on between you and Natalie, but we're caught in the middle of it. This financial stuff is starting to affect the kids. They're scared. We can't make the mortgage this month. Please don't punish all of us because you're mad at Natalie. Please. We're family." Family. That word had lost its meaning somewhere between Natalie calling me a burden and Brad threatening legal action. But still, I didn't hate Beatrice. Not yet. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. Later that week, I called Gloria. She'd been texting regularly to check in, and each time, she signed off with, "Call if you need anything." I finally did. She picked up on the first ring. "Evelyn?" "Gloria," I said, my voice soft. "Can I take you to lunch?" She laughed, relieved. "You're buying?" "Then absolutely." We met at a little cafe near my apartment. It was nothing fancy, plastic menus and vinyl booths, but it felt more genuine than the dozens of overpriced brunches I'd sat through with Natalie, listening to her complain about the color of her nail polish or the wine list. Gloria listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to explain it away. When I told her what Natalie had said to me the night of the heart attack, her eyes welled up. "My daughter would have torn the party apart," she whispered. "She would have carried me out herself." "When dogs disclaim," I nodded. But I didn't cry. "I've realized something," I said. "They don't see me as a person. They see me as a resource, a faucet, a vault, and now that I've closed the vault, they're trying to break the lock." "And what are you going to do?" she asked. I smiled. "I'm going to let them try." That afternoon, I received a formal letter from Brad's lawyer. It was a notice of concern regarding my health and decision-making capacity. He was building a case to claim I was mentally unfit to manage my own assets. He wanted to push for guardianship. I sent the letter to Sullivan, and for the first time since all of this began, I allowed myself to feel something close to rage. They didn't just want my money. They wanted control. They wanted to silence me permanently. They couldn't kill me, but they were willing to erase me. Well, let them try. They didn't know the woman I used to be, but they were about to meet her. When I was 32 years old, Martin and I bought our first property together, a rundown duplex in a forgotten corner of New Jersey. It smelled of mildew and defeat. We lived upstairs while renovating downstairs with nothing but grit, late-night coffee, and a dream. We flipped that house in 14 months, turned a small profit, and bought the next one. That was the beginning. Before I was mom, I was a strategist, a builder. A woman who knew contracts better than most lawyers and could negotiate a hard money loan in her sleep. Martin was the visionary, but I was the anchor. And now, after decades of being softened by family dinners, birthday cakes, and back-to-school shopping, that woman was awake again. When Sullivan confirmed that Brad's lawyer had filed a petition questioning my mental competency, I didn't panic. I instructed Sullivan to begin gathering medical evaluations, 3 of them, from reputable physicians. I had a clean bill of health. My mind was sharper than it had been in years, fueled not by fear, but by purpose. They wanted a war. They forgot I built empires during recessions. While Sullivan handled the legal countermeasures, I made a quiet plan to hit them where it hurt, the illusion of stability. Natalie and Brad had been living in that house for nearly 7 years. In the beginning, it was a gift, a wedding present, but I never officially transferred the deed. I had always retained full ownership for tax purposes, a detail they never questioned. I met with the property manager privately. We reviewed the lease. There wasn't one. They were technically squatters. The utilities had all been in my name. Even the HOA fees were paid with my personal account. I filed a 30-day notice to vacate. Legally, they had no claim. Emotionally, I knew it would destroy them. But destruction wasn't my goal. Clarity was. I wanted them to see what it meant to take someone for granted for so long that they finally stopped showing up. The letter arrived at their doorstep 3 days later. I didn't hear a word. But online, I saw cracks forming. Natalie posted a cryptic quote. "Some people are addicted to control, but karma always bites." It was shared by her friends, liked by Brad, and commented on by Beatrice with a heart emoji. Control. That word again. If protecting my life, my assets, my dignity made me controlling, then yes, I was guilty. I was also alive. On Sunday, Gloria came by with fresh-baked banana bread and news. "I ran into Natalie at the store," she said carefully. She looked pale, angry, said something about lawyers and Mom going off the deep end. I smiled at the bread. "Did she mention the heart attack?" "No." I laughed softly. "Of course not." The eviction rattled them. But it wasn't just the letter, it was what it represented. A shift in power. A mother no longer bending. A benefactor refusing to be used. Sullivan called later that evening. "They're filing an emergency petition," he said. "They're claiming emotional distress. Natalie's saying you've become erratic since Martin's death and that the heart attack may have affected your decision-making." Axplace. I paused. "Do they know I'm compiling medical reports?" "No," he said. "And I think it's time we surprise them." We scheduled a hearing for 2 weeks later. I would stand before a judge and defend my sanity. But more than that, I would defend my truth. In the meantime, I began to prepare not for court, but for liberation. I hired a designer to redo my downtown apartment, new curtains, fresh paint, soft lighting. I bought myself a set of silk pajamas. I booked a short weekend trip to a vineyard upstate, just me and a good novel. I started walking every morning with Gloria, who insisted on bringing coffee and laughter. It wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. Let them call it whatever they wanted. They would learn soon enough. I was not the feeble old woman they thought they could silence. I was the architect of their lifestyle, and I had just started reclaiming my blueprint. The morning of the hearing arrived with a crisp stillness. I stood in front of the mirror in my silk blouse and navy suit, carefully chosen not for vanity, but for dignity. I wanted the judge to see me as I was a woman who had lived, sacrificed, and survived, not the caricature my daughter had painted in legal paperwork. Gloria drove me to the courthouse, she insisted. "Family may fail you," she said, "but real friends don't." As we pulled up, I saw them, Natalie and Brad, standing outside the courthouse doors. Natalie wore black as though she were attending a funeral. Perhaps she thought she was. Brad clutched a folder under his arm, looking more like a stockbroker than a grieving son-in-law. They didn't acknowledge me. That was fine. I didn't come here for them. The courtroom was small, intimate. It felt like stepping into a theater where the drama was real and the consequences permanent. Sullivan sat beside me, calm and collected, while their lawyer, young, cocky, and poorly briefed, flipped through a binder thick with accusations. When the judge entered, we all stood. She was a woman in her 50s, sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. Good, I respected that. The hearing opened with Natalie's lawyer claiming I had shown erratic behavior since my husband's passing, citing the recent financial decisions, the eviction notice, and emotional volatility during the family party. She suffered a cardiac event, the lawyer said, and we believe it may have caused cognitive impairment. This isn't about money, it's about ensuring her safety. It was a good performance. Too good, because the judge saw right through it. Sullivan rose with quiet confidence. Your Honor, we have 3 certified statements from board-certified physicians, all of whom examined Mrs. Hart within the past 2 weeks, all attest to her full cognitive capacity. We also have records of her recent financial restructuring, which demonstrate not confusion but clarity, precision, intent. He handed over the documents. The judge flipped through them in silence. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Hart, she said, is there anything you'd like to say? I stood slowly, my legs trembling but not from fear. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear. I nearly died 2 weeks ago. I called my daughter while having a heart attack. She told me I was ruining her party. Then she ignored me. No hospital visit. No phone call. Not one moment of concern. Natalie shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. I spent 5 days in ICU, alone. And when I left the hospital, the first thing I received was a message from my son-in-law, threatening legal action because I cut off access to my money. The judge raised an eyebrow. I don't need guardianship. I need distance. And I'm finally strong enough to claim it. Silence filled the room. Natalie's lawyer stammered. Brad looked away. The judge leaned back in her chair. Petition denied, she said firmly. Mrs. Hart retains full autonomy over her finances and property. There is no evidence of impairment. Natalie gasped. The gavel struck once. And just like that, it was over. But I knew, as I walked out of that courtroom, that this wasn't the end. It was just the moment the curtain lifted. The real performance had only just begun. Outside, Natalie rushed after me. You humiliated us in there, she hissed. What happened to family? I stopped and turned to her slowly. Family? I said. Family shows up. Family doesn't try to lock you away for speaking the truth. Brad grabbed her arm and pulled her back. You'll regret this, he muttered. No, I said. I regret not doing it sooner. Gloria opened the car door, and I slid inside without looking back. On the drive home, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief. Power. The kind of power that comes not from money, but from finally knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone else define it again. That night, I poured a glass of wine and watched the sun dip behind the skyline. The court had sided with me, but more importantly, I had sided with myself. And for the first time in years, that was enough. After the court hearing, there was a different kind of silence. Before, it had been the cold, vacant silence of abandonment, no calls, no visits, no concern. Now, it was the charged, bitter quiet of a war they had lost, but weren't done fighting. Natalie didn't call again. Brad didn't email. Beatrice didn't send another letter. But I heard the ripples. Gloria's phone lit up one afternoon while we were at lunch. She turned it face down, but not before I saw the caller ID. Natalie. You can answer if you want, I said, half smiling. I know, she replied, but I don't want to. That was loyalty. Instead, Gloria handed me a piece of folded paper. I didn't want to tell you until I was sure, she said, but I ran into someone I know from the Homeowners Association. Apparently, Brad and Natalie are 3 months behind on dues. Water's been shut off again, and the bank sent a foreclosure warning. I took the paper silently. It was a copy of a public notice. My name wasn't on it, of course, because I had removed myself from that account, legally and emotionally. They're sinking, she added. I know, I said, but I felt nothing. That was the strange part. There was a time, just weeks ago, when even the thought of Natalie struggling would have shattered me. But now, I saw it clearly. Their suffering wasn't tragedy. It was consequence. I wasn't rooting for their downfall. But I also wasn't stepping in to soften it anymore. That week, I got an invitation in the mail. An old friend from my university days was retiring from her law firm and hosting a garden brunch. It had been decades since I'd seen her. She was one of the few women from my past who remembered me before I became mom, before I disappeared into family life. I RSVP'd yes. I bought a new dress, silk, navy, elegant. I had it tailored to my new body, slimmer from stress and solitude, but standing taller than it had in years. I booked a car service and told Gloria she could come if she promised not to wear sneakers. At the brunch, something unexpected happened. I was seen, not as a mother, not as a widow, not as the woman who once funded her family's every whim, but as Evelyn Hart, the woman who once debated case law with ferocity, who dreamed big with Martin, who could dissect a real estate deal over a single espresso. My old friend, Marilyn, hugged me tightly. "You haven't changed a bit," she said, "but something's different. You're glowing." I didn't say much, just smiled, because I was. Back home that evening, I opened my email and saw a message from Beatrice. Not long, just a few lines. "Evelyn, I don't know what Brad and Natalie have told you, but I'm sorry. Truly, I never wanted things to turn out this way. I didn't know about the petition until after it was filed. If there's ever a chance to talk, I'd be grateful. B." I stared at the message for a while. Not angry, not skeptical, just thoughtful. Beatrice had always been different. Quieter, more observant, less entitled. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I printed the message and folded it into my journal. Not everything required an immediate answer. Sometimes, distance is the clearest response. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker across the windows like stars trying to reach me. And I whispered, "You were right, Martin. I could survive without them. But more than that, I could thrive. Not out of spite, out of freedom." A week passed after Beatrice's email. I still hadn't replied. It wasn't because I was punishing her. It was because I had learned that not every door needed to be opened again just because someone knocked. Sometimes, the silence is the answer. Sometimes, space says what words cannot. Instead of dwelling on it, I started something new. I pulled out the old briefcases Martin and I used to use back when we were flipping properties. Inside were handwritten notes, blueprints, even a few checklists in my own younger, sharper handwriting. I ran my fingers across the paper and felt something stir a sense of capability I hadn't touched in decades. I decided to restart. Not a business, a purpose. I called an old contact from the housing department, a woman named Dana, who now worked with community renewal projects in East Orange. We talked for over an hour about abandoned buildings, affordable housing grants, and how many seniors were being pushed out by rising rents. "I want to help," I told her. "You still got fight in you?" she laughed. "More than ever." That afternoon, I filed the paperwork to register a new nonprofit, the Hart Foundation. It would fund housing renovation projects for elderly women who had been displaced, women like me, who had given their lives to others and been left behind. Natalie would have no idea. She never asked about the work I did before becoming her mother. She never knew about the deals I closed, the buildings I negotiated, the city council meetings I spoke at. She never cared to. She only knew Mom, the woman who sent her rent when Brad lost another job, who bought birthday gifts for the grandkids and cooked Thanksgiving dinner like it was owed. She never asked who I was before I became her cushion. Now she'd never know. And that was her loss. The next day, Gloria and I went to a small bookstore cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and dusty shelves. While I browsed the true crime section, she nudged me with her elbow. "Guess who I saw in the parking lot?" she whispered. I glanced up. Natalie. My stomach didn't twist like I expected. I just raised an eyebrow. She didn't see me, but she was rough, like she hadn't slept in days. I nodded once. "Beatrice was with her," Gloria added. "They were arguing. If you now take expected." Now that surprised me. Natalie never let anyone challenge her, especially not Beatrice. That evening, just before bed, my phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from Beatrice. "Evelyn, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I want you to know Natalie lied to us. She told us you were refusing medical help. She said you were unstable. I believed her. I'm sorry." I didn't know until after you collapsed. She never told anyone. Brad said not to get involved. End quote. The doing to the very five now are grows nated in a cat of disavivas. There was a pause. She's not who you think she is anymore. Or maybe this is who she's always been. I don't know. But I'm done. If you ever want to talk, I'll listen. The message ended. This time, I didn't delete it. I saved it. Not because I needed it, but because something in me believed it might one day help her save herself. But it wasn't my job anymore. That burden had been lifted. I turned out the light and went to bed with a strange sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally choosing yourself. A few days later, I was at City Hall with Dana, finalizing permits for the Hart Foundation's first property acquisition, a run-down, 2-unit building with chipped paint and rusted pipes but good bones. Just like me, it had been neglected for years. Just like me, it was still standing. "Evelyn," Dana said, flipping through papers, "I still can't believe you were off the radar for so long. You could have been running this department." End quote. I smiled. "I used to run something a lot harder, my family." She chuckled, but then paused. "You know, you don't have to do all this just to prove something to them." "I'm not," I said calmly. "I'm doing it to prove something to me." Later that week, we hosted a small press event, just a few local journalists, a ribbon, some folding chairs. Gloria stood by my side in her Sunday best, proud like she was watching her sister win an award. After I gave my short speech, one of the reporters asked, "What inspired this foundation?" I looked at the camera. "Loneliness," I said, "and clarity." I realized how many women out there are invisible. Mothers, wives, caretakers. We give and give until the world forgets we were ever here. I want to change that, one house at a time. They clapped. I held my head high. Meanwhile, miles away, Natalie and Brad's world was shrinking. I didn't need updates. I didn't ask for them, but news still found me. My neighbor, who also worked at the bank, mentioned that Brad's accounts were flagged for overdraft. Gloria told me the house they lived in was officially under foreclosure review. A mutual friend spotted Natalie working part-time at a boutique downtown, something she once said was beneath her. They were unraveling, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. One morning, a thick manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside were printed screenshots, dozens of them. Text messages between Brad and Natalie, threads of financial manipulation, plans to have me declared incompetent months before the heart attack. Even a spreadsheet detailing my assets color-coded, titled Post-Mom Wealth Allocation. My hands shook as I flipped through them. The final page was a message from Natalie. "Once she's out of the picture, we'll finally have our own lives." I sat very still. Then I picked up the phone and called Sullivan. "I need this documented, all of it." "Already on it," he said. "We're building a contingency case in case they try anything again. But, Evelyn, if I may, would you like to file charges?" I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, "No, not yet. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about truth, and now I had it." Later that night, I went to my closet and pulled down an old photo album. Inside was a picture of Natalie as a child laughing, her hair wild in the wind, holding a popsicle bigger than her face. She used to look at me like I was the whole world. When did that change? Maybe when I stopped saying yes. Maybe when I stopped making her problems disappear. Or maybe, I thought bitterly, the love had always been conditional. I tucked the photo back in the album and closed it gently. That part of my life was over. I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could write my ending. And it wouldn't be as someone's forgotten mother. It would be as Evelyn Hart, fully seen, fully heard, and finally fully in control. Winter came early that year. The cold crept in fast, biting through the city with a sharpness that made everything feel more raw. I sat by the window of my apartment wrapped in a knitted shawl Gloria had given me, sipping chamomile tea and watching people hurry by below coats tight, heads down. It was the season of family dinners, forced gratitude, and empty chairs. This time last year, I was baking pies for Natalie's Thanksgiving, folding linens she never washed, polishing silverware that never thanked me. And when dinner was served, I sat at the end of the table, smiled politely, and accepted my invisibility like a good mother should. This year, I received no invitation. Not even a pretense. And for the first time, I was relieved. Gloria invited me to her place instead. Her grandkids were coming in from college, her husband had dusted off the record player, and she promised no one would talk politics or make me cry. "I'm making sweet potatoes with marshmallows," she grinned. "Come hungry." I said yes. The day before Thanksgiving, a letter arrived. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't even signed personally. It was a printed holiday newsletter from Beatrice. "Seasons. Greetings from the Wilkins family," it read in large cursive font. There were photos, smiling children, a dog in a turkey costume, a mention of Brad getting closer to a new career opportunity, and Natalie launching an exciting fashion venture from home. No mention of the foreclosure. No mention of the court case. No mention of me. But on the last page, there it was barely noticeable. "We are learning, growing, and grateful for all the hard lessons this year has brought, especially the ones that reminded us how important honesty, humility, and second chances are. Wishing love and healing to all who need it." Subtle, calculated, insincere. I placed the letter in the recycling bin without another thought. Thanksgiving at Gloria's was loud and warm. Her youngest granddaughter insisted I take the seat at the center of the table. Her son-in-law refilled my wine glass before I could ask. And when they said grace, they included my name without hesitation. "We're thankful Evelyn's here with us tonight," Gloria said. I smiled. I hadn't felt this scene in years. When dessert was served, her granddaughter leaned over and asked, "Miss Evelyn, what did you do before you retired?" I paused. No one had asked me that in so long. "I used to build things," I said. "Homes, projects, businesses. And when I stopped doing that, I started raising a family." She looked impressed. "Did you like it?" I didn't lie. I loved parts of it, and I lost parts of myself in it too. But I'm getting those back now. She nodded, wise beyond her years. "That's good. You deserve to be more than someone's mom." I nearly cried. After dinner, I walked out into the cold with a heart warmer than it had been in years. The season of forced smiles and performative family roles had passed. I was no longer seated at the end of a table where I wasn't wanted. I had found a new table, and this time, I had chosen it. December rolled in, wrapped in silver frost and thin daylight. While the city dressed itself in twinkling lights and department store windows paraded joy and plenty, my heart felt still, not cold, not bitter, just clear. I hadn't heard from Natalie in weeks. Not since the last blow, those printed holiday lies she dressed in cinnamon and cheer. Beatrice hadn't followed up either. No apology, no visit, just that newsletter, coated with enough passive aggression to last the winter. The silence used to hurt. Now, it felt like closure. One morning, I walked to the post office to send out letters from the Heart Foundation. We were expanding into a second project, this time a collaboration with a local women's shelter. I felt useful again, not in the way they had used me, but in the way that gives your soul a reason to keep showing up. Outside the post office, I spotted someone I hadn't seen in years, an old friend from church, Marlene. She was in her 70s now, cane in hand, her lipstick slightly smudged like always. "Evelyn Hart," she gasped, grabbing my arm. "Lord, you look 10 years younger. What's your secret?" "Letting go," I said with a grin. She laughed. "Ain't that the truth?" We chatted for a while, and then she said, "I saw Natalie at the grocery store. She walked right past me like I didn't exist. Told people at the counter you'd lost your mind." I took a breath. "That's her story," I said simply. "Well," Marlene huffed, "it ain't the story I know, and it sure as hell ain't the story I'll tell." That stuck with me all the way home. It ain't the story I'll tell. Because stories, real ones, aren't just about what happened. They're about who tells them. And for too long, Natalie and Brad tried to write mine for me. They weaponized my generosity, rewrote my silence, bent my sacrifices into failures. But not anymore. That evening, I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Not a letter. A speech. I'd been invited to speak at the Winter Fundraiser Gala for women's housing initiatives. It was a small event, mostly local donors and advocates, but they wanted someone with a story, not just stats, not just figures. A heartbeat. I wrote through the night. When I took the stage the following week, the room fell quiet. "Most people think a heart breaks all at once," I began. "But in truth, it breaks slowly. In moments. In disappointments. In the words never said, the calls never returned, the love withheld. I told them about the hospital, the voicemail, the party. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I was left behind, I said, and for a while I believed that meant I had failed. But I've learned something since then. Sometimes being left behind is what sets you free. They stood when I finished, not out of pity, but out of recognition. Afterward, a woman in her 50s came up to me, eyes full of tears. "You told my story," she said, "word for word." We hugged like survivors. I left that night lighter than I'd arrived. Not because Natalie had changed, but because I no longer needed her apology. The truth was apology enough. It was nearly Christmas when the first snow settled on the city, covering the sidewalks in a soft hush that made everything seem gentler than it was. The holiday cheer didn't sting this year. There were no bitter ornaments or memories tangled in tinsel. There was just silence and peace. At the Hart Foundation's headquarters, a modest office above a bakery, we had finally hung the sign. My name was etched into the glass door in simple black lettering. Evelyn Hart, founder. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at it. Not out of vanity, out of gratitude. My name, my work, my story. No longer an invisible partner. No longer a footnote in someone else's life. Gloria walked up beside me, her arms full of boxes of donated coats. "Damn, it looks good," she said, eyes twinkling. "Told you you'd get top billing someday." "I don't even need a billing," I said. "Just a door I chose to walk through." Inside, the office buzzed with life. Volunteers packed bags, answered phones, planned outreach. A woman named May, 62, recently divorced, recently homeless, was helping with filing. She smiled at me shyly when I passed. "This place saved me," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "You saved yourself. We just left the light on." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my Christmas tree. I decorated it myself. Nothing extravagant. Just a few white lights, some glass ornaments, and a single gold star at the top. I sipped wine and thought about the old years, the noise, the arguments, the performance of family love. Natalie used to demand everything look perfect for Instagram. Brad pretended to care. Beatrice wandered in and out, always watching, never speaking up. There was no picture-perfect holiday this year, but there was peace. And then, like a ghost tapping at the edge of memory, my phone rang. "Beatrice." I stared at the screen. It rang, and stopped. A moment later, a text. "I'm sorry. That's all. I know it doesn't fix anything, but it's real. Merry Christmas." It was simple. No manipulation, no excuse. Just the truth. I didn't respond. But for the first time, I believed her. Later that week, a volunteer brought in an envelope she found slipped under the foundation's front door. It was addressed in Natalie's handwriting. Inside was a photo. Me, holding baby Natalie, sitting on the porch of our first house. I was 28, hair up in a scarf, paint on my jeans, smiling like the world hadn't broken me yet. Nothing else was in the envelope. No note, no return address, no words. And still it said everything. Not forgiveness, not redemption. But maybe, the first crack in the mask, maybe Natalie was beginning to remember. Or maybe, for the first time, she was starting to see. Either way, I took the photo and slid it into the frame on my desk right next to my name on the door. It was a reminder of who I was, of how far I'd come, and of the life I was still choosing, one silent Christmas at a time. January arrived with its usual chill, quiet streets, frost-bitten windows, and the odd feeling that everything had slowed down just enough for reflection to catch up. At the Hart Foundation, we called it the Season of Beginnings. Not because the new year promised anything magical, but because every woman who walked through our doors came looking for a fresh start, and we offered them one. That morning, I stood in front of our corkboard wall, pinning up the photo of May holding the keys to her new apartment. Her smile was toothy, proud, vulnerable. Her victory felt like mine. "Another life rebuilt," Gloria whispered beside me. "Another name remembered," I said. That's what this place had become, not just shelter, not just food or resources, but remembrance. A temple of all the women who'd been forgotten by others, but were now remembered by themselves. That same day, the foundation received its first major donation, an anonymous contribution of $25,000. We searched the system. No trace. A handwritten note came with it, scribbled in unfamiliar ink. In honor of the women who gave until they had nothing left, may they finally receive. There was no signature, no clue, but I knew. Not Brad, not Natalie, Beatrice. Or maybe someone like her. Someone watching from the edge, finally understanding the cost of silence. We used the money to renovate the kitchen in our second housing unit. Every tile, every cabinet, chosen by the women who would live there. It wasn't just about giving them a roof. It was about giving them control again. One night, I stayed late to finish some paperwork. Gloria had already gone home. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. And then, out of nowhere, a knock. I froze. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Natalie. She looked tired, paler than I remembered. Not broken, but chipped. I didn't speak. She stepped inside, held her coat tightly across her chest like armor, and scanned the room as if trying to understand how this version of me existed. "This is yours?" she asked. I nodded. "You did all this without us?" "Yes." Silence. Then, quietly, almost bitterly, "I didn't think you had it in you." That made me laugh, quiet, dry, not angry. "You never knew what I had in me, because you never asked." She looked down. "I brought something," she said, reaching into her bag. She handed me a worn folder, one of the old project proposals I'd written years ago, before Martin got sick. My handwriting, my annotations, my dream. "I found it in Dad's garage," she said. "It had your name on it. I don't remember you ever talking about these, because you didn't listen." She winced but didn't argue. We stood in that space between apology and accountability, between damage and its repair. "I'm not here to fix things," she said. I wanted to see it, with my own eyes." And she looked around again at the photo board, the organized chaos, the framed quote on the wall that read, "I gave, I gave, I gave," and then I began. And for a second, just a flicker, I saw the little girl I used to hold, the one who built towers out of blocks and said she wanted to be strong like Mommy. She swallowed hard. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then she left. No hug, no tears, no promises. But something had changed. She saw me, not as a burden, not as a resource, as a woman. Later that night, I wrote a note in my journal. When they stopped writing my story, I finally began to live it. February brought icy rain, the kind that slid down windows like tears too tired to fall. At the Heart Foundation, we were prepping for our monthly community dinner, a tradition that had started accidentally with one pot of chili and a handful of folding chairs. Now it had grown into a real event where women who'd once felt invisible came to be seen, heard, and fed with dignity. That afternoon, while volunteers set up tables and hung paper lanterns, I was in the back kitchen stirring cornbread batter when Gloria walked in with a look I'd come to know well, half amusement, half warning. "She's here," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. I didn't have to ask who. "Natalie." I let the spoon rest in the bowl. "She's alone?" "Looks like it." Eddie's problems sting. A strange calm washed over me. Not the numbness of old, not the fear I used to swallow when her name was mentioned. Just clarity. I wiped my hands, straightened my blouse, and walked out to the main hall. There she stood by the door, drenched from the rain. She wasn't dressed for a gala this time. Just jeans. A coat too thin for the weather. Her hair undone. No makeup. Nothing left to hide behind. "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said quickly. "I know," I replied. She looked around the room at the women chatting, the volunteers laughing, the smell of food beginning to drift through the air. "This is real," she murmured. "It always was." She hesitated. "Can I help?" The question caught me off guard. For years, Natalie had taken, assumed, expected. Never once had she offered her hands to build something with me, only ever to benefit from what I'd already built. But something about her tone, it wasn't entitled. It was raw, quiet, honest. I nodded once. "Gloria's short on chairs. Go ask her where they're stored." She nodded and disappeared into the back. For the next hour, I watched her move chairs, stack napkins, pour drinks. No performance, no dramatic apologies, Just action, quiet penance. Dinner began. We sat in a large circle, plates full, stories flowing like old songs. Natalie didn't speak much, but she listened, closely, eyes soft, posture humbled. At the end of the night, as we cleaned up, she came to me again. Her voice almost broke when she asked, "Would it be all right if I came next month too?" I looked at her, not the daughter I once knew, not the woman who had hurt me, but the human being in front of me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "That depends on who shows up next time." She nodded. Fair. And for once, she didn't ask for more. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I pulled out a card I'd written weeks ago. It was supposed to be for her birthday, one I wasn't sure I'd ever give. Inside I had scribbled, "This isn't a story about forgiveness. This is a story about truth. If you ever want to join me in it, come as you are, but come honest." I never mailed it, but somehow, she'd read it anyway. The following weeks passed quietly. Natalie didn't return right away, and I didn't expect her to. Change doesn't come in grand gestures. It arrives in the gaps between silence and consistency. I wasn't interested in more apologies. I was watching for patterns, new ones. The foundation continued to grow. We held job training workshops, partnered with a local clinic to provide mental health services, and signed a lease for our third property. One afternoon, while going through old documents in storage, Gloria found a thick manila envelope labeled Hart Family Trust, Draft. "Have you seen this?" she asked, dusting it off. I hadn't. Inside were notes from Martin, handwritten, his legal drafts from years ago, long before his illness. It outlined an early version of our estate plans. There, in clear ink, was a line that made my breath catch. "In the event of Evelyn's incapacitation or death, full authority of all assets shall be granted to her, unless evidence of family misconduct surfaces. In that case, assets shall be redirected at her discretion." He knew. Even then, before the betrayal had names, he knew what I was worth and what they were capable of. I sat down and wept. Not because I was sad, but because I felt seen. Martin had written the kind of love I needed most. Trust in my strength. Later that night, I updated my own documents. I left a portion to Beatrice, should she ever choose to rebuild her own path, a portion to the foundation. And a final note, one Natalie would one day read, if she ever truly wanted to know the woman behind the casseroles and checkbooks. In the note, I didn't offer forgiveness. I offered truth. Asterisk, "You tried to rewrite me," I wrote, "but I had already written myself, long before you decided who I was allowed to be." A week later, Natalie returned. She didn't come with tears. She came with her hands full of grocery bags and a list of donations she had gathered from friends at work. Quietly, she stocked shelves, sorted canned goods, and didn't interrupt anyone's space. She left without saying much, but before walking out the door, she looked at me. "I read the proposal," she said. "I didn't have to ask which one," she continued. "You were doing all this, all those years, and I never knew." I gave a small shrug. "You never asked." She nodded, eyes misting, then added, "I was afraid to see you as more than just my mother, because then I'd have to reckon with how little I knew you." There it was. Not confession, not pity, just truth. I didn't hug her, but I smiled, and that was enough. That night I went home and crossed out one line in my journal. "They tried to erase me." End quote. Below it I wrote, "But I was never theirs to erase." March came with thawing sidewalks and the first hints of bloom. The cold loosened its grip, and the city felt like it was exhaling after holding its breath too long. At the Hart Foundation, we celebrated our third anniversary with a simple open house and home-cooked food from the women who now called our project home. I watched them laugh, hug, share recipes, women who once arrived with nothing but grief and a garbage bag of clothes. Now they made toasts with plastic cups and cried happy tears over donated curtains. It was the kind of healing that made pain worth surviving. Later that week, I received a letter from a lawyer, not Sullivan, but someone new. Natalie had initiated a review of her own finances. In the process, she discovered a remaining trust fund Martin had created years ago, one she hadn't touched, likely because she didn't know it existed. The letter said she was requesting to reallocate part of it, to support the work of the Hart Foundation. I blinked, reading it twice. No conditions, no strings, no PR angle, just a line, "It's yours, if you'll have it." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I visited the small garden behind our second property, a space Natalie had helped plant weeks ago, though she hadn't said a word about it. Tulip bulbs were pushing through the frost, tiny signs of life that had chosen to come back, even after being buried. I sat on the bench and thought about legacy. Not the kind built from money or buildings, but the kind passed down in character. In choice, Natalie wasn't who I raised her to be, but maybe, finally, she was trying to raise herself. That night, Gloria and I shared tea on my balcony. She read the letter, then handed it back with a knowing look. "So?" she asked. "I'll accept it," I said. "Not for me. For the women we haven't met yet. The ones who still think their lives ended when someone walked out, or betrayed them, or left them for dead." "Full circle," Gloria said softly. "Not quite," I replied, "but maybe the start of a new one." 2 days later, I met Natalie at the community garden. She was already digging, hands dirty, hair tied back like when she was a kid helping me weed the yard. I handed her the signed acceptance letter. She didn't cry, didn't smile. She just nodded and whispered, "Thank you." "It is the same Avent." I looked at her. Not the daughter I'd lost, not the child I remembered, but the woman she might still become. "You're welcome," I said, "but you don't owe me redemption." "I know." She paused, then added, "But I owe it to myself." We worked in silence after that. Not everything needed to be said. Some things only needed to be planted. Spring settled into the city with soft rains and sunlight that stayed a little longer each day. At the Heart Foundation, the halls felt lighter, fewer emergencies, more planning, laughter echoing from the kitchen instead of tears. Our third property was almost complete, and the waiting list for residency grew by the week. But for the first time, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt ready. One morning, while sorting paperwork in my office, I stumbled across a letter I had written but never sent to myself. It was dated the week after I was discharged from the hospital. The handwriting was shaky, the paper stained with the faintest ring of a teacup. "Dear Evelyn," it began, "you were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who refused to see." I read it now like a message from a past version of me, a woman gasping for space in her own life, finally realizing that survival wasn't the same as living. I tucked the letter into a drawer. It had served its purpose. That afternoon, Natalie arrived early for the garden shift. She came alone, as usual, but this time she brought something in her hands, a photo album. The one from our old house, the one she once said she didn't care about. "I thought you should have this," she said, handing it over. "I've been going through it, trying to remember who I was and who you were." I opened it slowly. There were the birthdays, the camping trip, Martin asleep in a lawn chair, Beatrice in her prom dress, Natalie with jelly on her face and my arms around her waist. Moments I thought had meant nothing to her. "They meant something," she said, as if reading my thoughts. "I just didn't know how to hold them without blaming you for the pieces that hurt." We sat on the bench by the tulips now blooming, full and bright like little suns. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "You don't have to," I replied. "Just keep showing up." She smiled small, real, tired. That evening, I hosted a private dinner at the foundation. Just a few women, the core team, Gloria, and surprisingly Beatrice. She had returned from a retreat in Vermont, hair cropped short, clothes plain, eyes clearer than I'd ever seen. "May I say something?" she asked, before we ate. We all nodded. She stood. "For a long time," she began, "I measured my value by who approved of me. I stood in rooms where silence made me complicit, and I'm not proud of that, but I am here, because Evelyn Hart reminded me that standing up doesn't always mean speaking loud. Sometimes, it just means refusing to look away." I didn't cry, but I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just a release. Later, as I locked up the foundation, Natalie lingered at the door. "Do you think I'll ever be enough?" she asked. I didn't answer with comfort. I answered with truth. "You already are. You just have to stop asking people who benefit from your doubt." It sighed in Jime. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek, and walked into the night. And I stood there in the doorway, hands in my pockets, heart steady. The house behind me was full. The world ahead was open. And the quiet? The quiet wasn't empty. It was peace. The Hart Foundation's annual spring benefit took place in a converted library downtown, a building once left for dead, now glowing with chandeliers and laughter. The walls were lined with framed portraits of our residents, not as victims, but as visionaries, each captioned with one word they had chosen to reclaim: survivor, builder, mother, artist. Enough. I stood near the back, hands clasped, watching the room fill. Natalie arrived late. Not fashionably, intentionally. She wore a simple navy dress. No jewelry, no pretense. She didn't come to be seen. She came to witness. Gloria nudged me. You ready? I smiled. As I'll ever be. I am. When I stepped on stage, the applause felt warmer than applause usually does, not polite, not obligated, just full, real. I waited for the quiet, then began. My name is Evelyn Hart, I said. A pause. Once, I was a wife who gave everything to a man who gave me very little in return. Once, I was a mother who believed love meant sacrifice. Once, I was a woman whose name was whispered behind doors she bought but was never invited through. I took a breath. And now, I am the founder of this house, this hope, this future. The room was still. I didn't come here to blame anyone. I came here to claim something. My name, my story, my worth. I looked out and found Natalie, tears in her eyes, not from guilt, but from something harder, recognition, the kind that breaks and rebuilds in the same breath. After the speech, she approached me, slowly, carefully. I never knew how much I needed to hear you say your name, she whispered. I never knew how long I'd been waiting to say it, I replied. She placed something in my hand, a locket. I found this in Dad's desk. It was meant for you. Inside was a photo of us, me and Martin, before things grew complicated. The back was engraved, to Evelyn. For every wall you built without thanks. I didn't cry, but my heart bowed in silence. We didn't hug, but we stood together. For once, not in opposition, but in alignment. When the night ended and the lights dimmed, I remained in the room a moment longer, alone, listening, to my name still echoing in the air. Evelyn Hart. No longer a ghost in her own life. No longer asking for permission to be seen. Just standing. As herself. Whole. This is not just a story of betrayal, it's a testament to resilience. Evelyn Hart's journey reminds us that silence is not peace, and giving doesn't mean disappearing. She taught us that even after years of being dismissed, used, or forgotten, one can rise not in rage, but in quiet reclamation. The most powerful justice is not revenge, it's rebuilding your life in full view of those who tried to erase you. Sometimes, the loudest victory is simply saying your name and meaning it.